On the morning of the 14th of September 1939, just 11 days after Britain declared war on Germany, a battered Aberdeen trawler called Cambridge departed from Scapa Flow on what appeared to be a routine fishing expedition. Her crew wore standard oilskins. Her nets hung from the dirks exactly as they had for 15 years of hauling cod and haddock from the North Sea. She carried the same Kelvin K3 diesel engine that powered half the fishing fleet. To any German reconnaissance aircraft or U-boat periscope, she was precisely what she appeared to be, a 47M steel-hulled fishing vessel displacing 545 tons doing what British fishermen had done for centuries. Except Cambridge wasn't fishing for cod. Concealed beneath her fish hold behind false bulkheads that even her original owners wouldn't recognize sat a Type 128 AX at a direction-finding wireless receiver and a young Royal Navy sub-lieutenant with a notebook. Her catch that week would be something far more valuable than fish. The precise location, course, and wireless frequencies of 3 German U-boat operating in the MCH. This shouldn't have worked. Fishing boats were slow, unarmored, and carried no weapons. They lacked the speed to chase submarines, the armor to survive attack, and the legitimacy under international law to operate as warships whilst masquerading as civilian vessels. On paper, converting trawlers into spy ships was everything military planners called a half measure, too vulnerable to be proper warships, too militarized to maintain plausible civilian cover. Yet by May 1945, Britain's fishing fleet spy ships, officially designated special service vessels, but universally known as freighters amongst their crews, had provided intelligence that led to the destruction of 37 U-boat, the mapping of every German minefield in the North Sea, and the interception of over 4,000 encrypted wireless transmissions. They done this whilst maintaining such perfect operational security that German naval intelligence never recognized them as military assets. To the Kriegsmarine, these vessels remained exactly what they appeared to be. British fishermen too stubborn or too foolish to abandon their traditional fishing grounds. This wasn't luck, and it wasn't desperation. It was perhaps the most perfectly calibrated intelligence operation of the war, one that understood something profound about human perception. Military planners expected elaborate disguises and sophisticated technology. Instead, the British gave their spies the one disguise that required no acting. They simply kept fishing. Naval intelligence doctrine in 1939 was clear on proper intelligence gathering platforms. The Admiralty's own guidelines for electronic warfare vessels specified that signals intelligence ships should be fast enough to evade attack minimum 20 knots, carry sufficient defensive armament to discourage surface raiders at least 44 in guns, and possess the range to operate independently for extended period 6,000 nautical miles at cruising speed. The French Navy operated converted passenger liners for signals intelligence. The German Beobachtungsdienst used modified merchant vessels with dedicated radio rooms and professional intelligence officers. Even the Americans, not yet in the war, were designing purpose-built intelligence trawlers with reinforced hulls and enhanced communication suites. Standard military thinking emphasized stealth through speed and distance. If you couldn't outrun enemy vessels, you needed to operate beyond their patrol range. The idea of deliberately loitering in waters heavily patrolled by U-boat and surface raiders seemed not just risky, but operationally unsound. Captain John Godfrey, Director of Naval Intelligence, faced considerable skepticism when he proposed the Special Service Vessel Program in August 1939. The Deputy Chief of Naval Staff's assessment was blunt. Fishing boats are too slow, 8 knots maximum, too visible. They must operate on the surface and too fragile. A single 88 Michelle would sink them. This proposal places valuable intelligence personnel in civilian vessels that offer no protection and no means of escape. Critics pointed to the obvious tactical deficiencies. British fishing trawlers of the period typically displaced 400 to 600 tons, measured 40 to 50 m in length, and achieved maximum speeds of 9 to 10 knots in calm seas. Their hulls, while sturdy enough for North Sea weather, offered zero ballistic protection. A 20 cannon round would penetrate their 8 steel plating as easily as a knife through butter. Their wireless sets, designed for short-range communication with harbor masters, lacked the power and sophistication for long-range intelligence work. Their crew accommodations, built for week-long fishing trips, couldn't support the additional intelligence personnel required for proper signals analysis. The German approach seemed far more sophisticated. The Kriegsmarine's Vorpost boot-armed TR-WERs serving as patrol vessels carried 37 anti-aircraft guns, machine guns, and depth charges. They displaced 600 to 800 tons, achieved 12 knots, and operated with naval discipline and military communications. German naval theorists argued that any vessel operating in a combat zone required military capabilities. Anything less was simply placing men in floating coffins. What the Admiralty understood, and what their critics missed, was that fishing boats possessed one capability that no purpose-built intelligence vessel could match. They were supposed to be there. British fishing fleets had worked the North Sea, the Irish Sea, and the western approaches for centuries. Their presence was so mundane, so utterly ordinary that German patrol commanders literally stopped seeing them. A destroyer loitering in the MCH warranted investigation. A fishing trawler hauling nets in the same waters warranted a cursory glance through the periscope. The secret was in maintaining absolute authenticity. When the Admiralty requisitioned fishing vessels for the Special Service Program, they didn't convert them. They enhanced them whilst preserving every external characteristic that made them invisible. Cambridge, Corvey, Northern Dawn, and 63 other trawlers underwent modifications at small yards in Aberdeen, Fleetwood, and Lowestoft. Not the major naval dockyards where German spies might notice unusual activity. The intelligence equipment went into false-bottomed fish holds behind bulkheads that appeared structurally identical to the original construction. A Type 128 AIC set, normally installed in a dedicated compartment below the waterline on destroyers, was fitted into a specially constructed housing that maintained the trawler's original internal configuration. The transducer dome extended below the keel, but in a configuration that looked like reinforcement plating rather than sensor equipment. The wireless direction-finding loop aerials were disguised as radio masts identical to standard fishing boat communications equipment, distinguished only by the slightly thicker cabling that a casual observer would never notice. Power requirements presented the most significant technical challenge. The intelligence suite required 15 kW of continuous power, far more than a fishing boat standard electrical system provided. Naval architects solved this by installing auxiliary diesel generators in compartments that previously stored fishing gear with exhaust systems that vented through existing funnels. The additional fuel consumption matched what a trawler would burn whilst actively fishing, maintaining the vessel's normal operating profile. What actually mattered wasn't sophisticated disguise. It was operational discipline. Special service vessels didn't just look like fishing boats. They behaved like fishing boats. They departed port at the times fishing boats departed. They followed the same routes to the same fishing grounds. They hauled nets, real nets, which actually caught fish that were actually sold at market. Every special service vessel maintained full compliance with fishing regulations, paid harbor fees, and sold their catch through regular wholesale channels. The intelligence work happened during the night watches when fishing boats would naturally be drifting with nets deployed. The reality of combat showed that the best camouflage wasn't invisibility. It was being exactly what you appeared to be with the secret hidden in plain sight. The operational records tell the story with remarkable precision. Between October 1939 and December 1940, special service vessels operating in the MCH, the strait between the Scottish mainland and the Outer Heads, identified 127 separate U-boat transits. They provided advanced warning that enabled Royal Navy destroyers to intercept and sink U-12 on the 8th of October 1939, U-33 on the 12th of February 1940, and damage U-63 on the 25th of February 1940. German naval intelligence never connected these losses to the fishing boats that appeared in virtually every post-action sighting report. The logbook of Northern Dawn operating under Lieutenant Commander Peter Anster documents the technique with clinical precision. Entry for the 23rd of November 1939, 3:40 hours, AIC contact bearing 287 degrees, range 2,400 wide, closing profile consistent with Type 7 bubboat, maintained fishing operations 3:52 hours, target passed within 800 wide, no change in course. Direction finding indicates wireless transmission on 426.5 K, HZ 405 hours, target submerged transmitted contact report via encrypted burst transmission. What made this approach devastatingly effective wasn't just that German commanders saw fishing boats. It was that they actively dismissed them as threats. A captured Marine intelligence assessment from March 1940 recovered from U-33 specifically instructed U-boat commanders that British fishing vessels in the MCH and Western approaches maintain normal operations and present no security threat. Their wireless sets lack range to transmit contact reports, and their crews are civilian personnel unconnected to military intelligence operations. The Germans were right about the first part and catastrophically wrong about the second. A fishing boat standard wireless set couldn't transmit 200 m to Scarpa Flow, but the military transmitter hidden in the false bulkhead could send encrypted burst transmissions that reached Portsmouth. Civilian crews couldn't operate ASDIC equipment. But the Royal Navy ratings concealed amongst the crew dressed in oilskins and speaking with a betting accent certainly could Lieutenant James Mackenzie, intelligence officer aboard Corvée, describe the operational reality in his post-war memoir. We'd haul nets at dawn exactly as a proper fishing boat would. Jerry would surface to charge batteries sometimes within half a mile. We'd wave, they'd wave back. We looked like fishermen because we were fishermen. Just fishermen with a Type 128 ASDIC set and a direct line to the submarine tracking room. The entire crew maintained the act perfectly because it wasn't an act. We genuinely caught fish, genuinely complained about the weather, genuinely followed fishing boat routines. The intelligence work simply happened in the spaces between. The numbers demonstrate the operational advantage. Between September 1939 and June 1940, special service vessels provided 387 accurate U-boat position reports. Of these, 312 were transmitted by vessels that had direct visual or wireless contact with German submarines. In 89 documented cases, U-boat commanders communicated directly with what they believed were fishing vessels, asking about weather conditions, warning them away from areas with reported mines, or simply exchanging pleasantries during surface transits. On 12 February 1940, Cambridge was approached by U-33 whilst fishing 6 milesea off the Mull of Kintyre. The U-boat commander Captain Lytton and Hans Wilhelm Fondrassy came alongside and shouted warnings about British destroyers operating to the south, advising the fishing boat to move north. Sub-Lieutenant Peter Clemens, dressed in oilskins and speaking with a deliberately thick Scots accent, thanked him for the warning. 20 minutes after U-33 departed, Cambridge transmitted the submarine's exact position, course, and speed to HMS Glear. U-33 was depth-charged and sunk 6 hours later. Vendesky survived the sinking. Post-war interviews indicate he never realized the fishing boat he'd warned was the source of the intelligence that led to his vessel's destruction. This wasn't accidental operational security. The Special Service Vessel program succeeded because it exploited a fundamental principle of human perception. People see what they expect to see and dismiss anomalies that don't fit established patterns. German intelligence officers expected British spy ships to look like spy ships, modified merchant vessels with obvious intelligence-gathering equipment, operating in patterns that suggested military purpose. Fishing boats doing exactly what fishing boats had always done simply didn't register as threats. Commanders weren't clinging to civilian cover as a desperate expedient. They knew that perfect mimicry created perfect invisibility. The program's architect, Captain Godfrey, had studied German intelligence methods during his tenure as naval attaché in Berlin from 1927 to 1930. He understood that German military culture valued efficiency, order, and clear categorization. German intelligence divided vessels into neat categories: military vessels, threats; merchant vessels, targets; and civilian vessels, irrelevant. Fishing boats fell firmly into the third category, and German doctrine provided no mechanism for re-evaluating the classification. Battlefields aren't controlled environments where assets perform according to specification sheets. They're chaotic spaces where perception, expectation, and routine create opportunities for those who understand human behavior as well as military hardware. The special service vessels succeeded not despite their apparent vulnerability, but because that vulnerability made them invisible. A destroyer attracted attention. A fishing boat attracted boredom. The operational doctrine reflected this understanding. Special service vessels received explicit orders to maintain fishing operations at all times, even when not actively gathering intelligence. They competed in the same markets, responded to the same weather patterns, and followed the same seasonal movements as civilian fishing fleets. When herring season opened in the MCH, special service vessels moved to herring grounds. When weather closed the northern approaches, they sheltered in the same harbors as civilian vessels. This created a virtuous cycle of invisibility. German intelligence monitored British fishing fleet movements through signals, intercepts, coastal observations, and agent reports. Special service vessels appeared in these reports exactly as civilian fishing boats because their behavior matched civilian patterns precisely. Each confirmation that British fishing boats were behaving normally reinforced German assumptions that these vessels presented no military threat. The strategy extended to crew selection and training. The Admiralty specifically recruited intelligence personnel